Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream on the History by podcast. And tonight I'm joined by Dr. Robin Price, and we're continuing Price Week. This is the fifth episode of this week's Price Week. And with that being said, Bob, thank you for joining me today.
Well, it's always great fun. I'm lucky to be here.
And again, as I've said in the previous days, it's based on the Amazing Colossal Apostle. That's what these discussions are based on. The link to purchase it will be in the description below and the pinned comment, along with many other books that Bob has written and published over the years. Also a link to his Substack page if you want to go read his stuff over there. So tonight we're covering the Epistle to the Philippians, a compressed forgery in Paul's name. It appears to begin and end again many times. That's why I put the word compressed in the title, a compressed forgery, a compression of several letters or a compilation of letters that was put together. So, Bob, when you look at the Epistle to the Philippians, what stands out to you in contrast to the other epistles about it? And what makes it, in your view, a forgery?
Well, for one thing, I think it could almost be called a fourth pastoral epistle. It's got the bishops and deacons like First and Second Timothy and Titus do, but unlike any of the others. So it seems to me it's that marks it as late, but also the heavy irony in there that where he says, boy, I'd like nothing better than to be beheaded and fly on up to heaven to be with Christ. But I know that's not going to happen because I'm needed among you and I'll continue to be active. And I don't count myself to have been perfected yet, but I will be when I get to heaven. All of that seems to me to imply that the actual writer knows, the readers know, Paul did already die as a glorious martyr. And it just seems to me that it lays it on too thick for anything else. It's like you're left saying, wow, he did witness for Christ even to the last minute. And now, sniff, he's wearing his martyr's crown up there. And the business about him continuing on for their benefit is sort of a winking reference to the fact that someone is taking his role and writing in his name. This letter is the way he's continuing to work with them and for them. That not only that, it does seem to be, as you pointed out, a collection of three different short letters. Now, that's not odd because, as I've mentioned before, and probably everybody here knows, ancient letters were very short unless you wanted to really write a treatise and sort of just gratuitously put on an opening and a closing, like Hebrews is pretty obviously that. Only they kind of forgot the salutation. But these are more the regular length of a letter. And how do we know that? Well, because we have loads of papyrus letters that were discovered, for instance, at Oxyrhynchus, along with snippets from a copy of the Gospel of Thomas. It's so crazy. They were used to stuff the cured hides of alligators. So in the tombs they dug up, they had these stuffed alligators, and they opened them up, and there were a whole lot of just paper garbage in there, including receipts, bills, wedding announcements, all kinds of just trivial stuff. But there were a few bits and pieces of Gospels, but the letters were very short, and that apparently was the general practice. Well, it's interesting, and I think striking, that some decades ago, both I think it was Gunther Bornkamm and Walter Schmidhals, both Bultmann disciples, if I'm not mistaken, they both decided to analyze Philippians and came up with three constituent early letters. And you mentioned how it seems to end and start again and so forth. Well, they came up with exactly the same map, so to speak. There wasn't any difference. It's so clear that, yeah, it really falls neatly into three letters. So it's hard to know whether anybody was actually trying to make them into a single letter or was trying to just preserve three of them continuously, like a mini anthology. The correspondence of Paul to the Philippians. It's really tough to say, but that's now this. I don't know if it's a mark of lateness or not, but the famous Canosis hymn in chapter 2, verses really, they usually say 5 through 11. It's really 6 through 11. It says, "Have this mind," or this attitude in you, which was in Christ Jesus. And what follows appears to be a hymn. It starts with "who," because it's like all these hymns. There's another one in Colossians. It's a Christological hymn. And it says that Christ deferred for the good of others. He made a great sacrifice. The guy lived in divine splendor, and yet he not only set that aside for the grungy existence of a human being with all the thousand shocks that flesh is heir to, but he even volunteered for or submitted himself to death. And then, in a phrase that interrupts the meter of the original, even death on a cross. So that might be an addition, but it doesn't really matter much in any event. He even went to the point of death. And because of that, like going, well, he didn't consider equality with God something to be seized, but did just the opposite. Sort of like the gospel saying, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Well, this applied even to him. And because he did this incredible thing, God has actually super exalted him, so that, and then they quote Isaiah, that he gave him the name above every name, quote, so that every knee should bow and every tongue confess in heaven, on earth, and under the earth that Jesus Christ is Kurios, Lord. Now, this is filled with fascinating things, one of which is it might be docetic, because it says he was in the form, the morphe of God, and exchanged it for the morphe of a human being. Now, this is maddening, because morphe could mean either form or nature. And of course, if you say he had the nature of God and then set it aside for the nature of a mortal human, there you have an idea that Christ was already fully divine. But if you say form, well, he could have been an angel. It's not clear at all. And so he could have tried to seize equality, and they're probably thinking of like Isaiah 14 there. By this time, that was probably interpreted as referring to Satan, Halal, the son of Shahar. He said, "I will be like Elyon. I will ascend to Mount Zaphon, the meeting hall of the gods. But bad luck, pal. You're cast down, and you don't even have a decent burial." Well, it's sort of like saying he didn't make that mistake. He willingly dove into the hell of mortal existence, including death. And for such a sacrifice, he was given the name that is above every name. Now, what is that name? This is really fascinating to me. Paul Couchot, I think, who was a mythicist, pointed this out. I remember once I was in the basement of the theological library at Drew University, and happened upon this old article by Paul Louis Couchot about this passage. And he pointed out the name that is above every name is not Kurios, Jesus Christ is Lord. No, it's Jesus is the name, because it goes on to say that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, every tongue should confess. Whoa. And he said that alone precludes the possibility of a historical Jesus. That this entity only was granted the throne name of Jesus after his death and exaltation, whatever form the latter took. I don't see anything wrong with that. I guess you can't prove that's what it means, because in the letter to the Hebrews, it does speak of Lord as a name. But if you don't use that cross reference, which is to say, if you don't pretend this is saying that, because it's not exactly the same, that is a pretty powerful argument that whoever wrote this hymn did not know of an itinerant miracle worker and teacher named Jesus. It doesn't say how he wound up dying and all that, but and this is the thing Eastern Orthodox soteriology is based on. They said, you see, the thing wasn't judicial so much that we had a debt of sin toward God, and he took it. Now, you find that in 2 Corinthians very clearly, but is that here? And Orthodox theologians say, no, the idea was he assumed humanity, which is to say mortality. And because if he hadn't become incarnate, or whatever, assumed the form of a human being, then he wouldn't have been able to do what he did in their minds, namely assume humanity so that he could transform it into divinity. That's what happens to us through faith and good works in the sacraments. We become gradually transformed by means of theosis, they call it, or divinization, or deification. St. Athanasius said, God became man so that man might become God, which is a pretty nervy thing to say. So this is packed with interesting implications, and docetism is another one, right? Because of the form of a man. That's sort of cagey, right? Did he look like a man? I think in which one? One of the undisputed Pauline epistles, it says he came in the likeness of sinful flesh. Well, you mean he had this flesh, or you would have thought he did? Well, it would have been a lot easier if he'd have just said, like for John chapter 1 does, the word became flesh, but that's not what it says. Now, how this has to do with either the Pauline authorship or the date of it, I don't know, because it's up in the air as to how Christology developed. And if there was a straight line trajectory of it, I don't think there was, because you wound up with a whole bunch of different Christologies, and you probably would not have if there was an original Jesus or apostolic Christology. You got bits of adoptionism, or Jesus being a half divine demigod and so on. But this might be evidence for docetism. And one other thing, as I rant on about this, James D.G. Dunn and others said, this isn't talking about a pre-existent Christ. It means that God sent his son, as it says in Galatians, but God sent Moses, God sent Jeremiah and Isaiah. It doesn't mean he swooped down from heaven, doesn't have to anyway. Maybe it just means he sent him on his mission. And what about the not seeking equality with God and all that? Well, he's the new Adam, the last Adam. And Adam was not a pre-existent being. Neither need Christ have been. It just means he didn't act in hubris as Adam did. He did not seek to glorify himself. Rather, he became a servant of all mankind. And we ought to do the same. After all, it says, have this mind in you. It doesn't mean like that you think you're God, but now you're going to take a vacation from it. No, you need to be as humble to become a servant as he did. So that's one of the chief issues in interpreting the epistle. But alas, I don't think it helps much in terms of, hey, is this the real Paul or is this early or late? But I do think the big dead giveaway is this seeming prescience of his imminent demise that is painted in such colors that the reader is assumed already to know what happened. But at any rate, I'm wandering far from it. But the idea that there are three letters, again, that's not a problem. If the Apostle Paul wrote three letters to the Philippians, what the heck? Somebody just put them one after the other. It's no different than having a collection of the three Johannine letters. So that doesn't weigh in on it. But I do think pseudonymity is demanded by this phony retrospective thing.
Ovid, thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate it. Solara Knight, thank you for your super chat. Philippians 4:3. Paul mentions esoteric knowledge about Yahweh's book of life. Is the book of life and book of deeds and remembrance actually Akashic records?
I forgot to put my glasses on, so I cannot look up the passage. Could you read Philippians 4:3 for me?
Sure. I'm just gonna
talk about being prepared.
I'm just gonna pull it up. Let's see. 1 second. Okay. It says, and I ask you also, true yokefellow, help these women, for they have labored side by side with me in the gospel together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life.
Yeah, I think that the thing with the Akashic records is interesting because think of in the book of Revelation when it says the books were opened and what everybody did, whether good or evil, was recorded in the books. What sort of books? I mean, do you think they're literal paper or papyrus or vellum? It's apparently some envisioned as some supernatural something or other. And if you say that, you're getting pretty close to the occult idea of Akashic records. And maybe it's not exactly, well, look at Islam. The Quran is supposed to be transcription from the mother of the book, the heavenly Quran, that was all probably eternally written. And it was gradually dictated piecemeal by Gabriel to Muhammad. Well, again, does God actually have big bound paper volumes in heaven? That kind of implies some sort of cosmic beyond material record where everything is preserved. It's not that different, I should say. But I'm not sure this goes that far because this sounds like something like in the book of Revelation, or it says to one of the churches that I will, if you overcome, etc., I will not cross your name out from the book of life or erase it or blot it or whatever your translation says. That seems to be the role of the saints, that if you are a true believer, etc., you're in. It's like the great scene in Matthew, I guess, when Jesus anticipates the final judgment, and there's this line of people waiting to get in as if it's some kind of disco, and he says, "Gee, I'm sorry, I don't know you." It's like your name is not on the list, like the bouncer says. So I'm afraid you're out of luck. Goodbye. I think that's kind of what they mean there, that these guys are definitely in. These people, I worked with them. They're true believers and workers for the gospel. And so they're, when the book of life is opened, as Revelation also says, they're in there, so they're in. Sometimes in the Bible, the book of life just means the roll call of the living, and that as long as you're alive, you're in there, and you get crossed out when you die. But usually, I think it's not like it appears a whole bunch of times in the Bible, but when it does, usually, as I recall, it does seem to mean you're one of God's favorites. You're a member of the club thanks to your faith in him. Like in Luke, the 70, I think it is, come back from their mission, and they're just thrilled. We were able to cast out demons. We did this and that and the other thing. And Jesus says, well, fine, but don't rejoice in this. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Okay, so you've made it. You're one of God's people, and you're in. Not that you couldn't screw it up, right? Because in Revelation you could be crossed out if you don't watch out. He knows who's been naughty and nice, and you could probably get the switches and ashes on the judgment day instead of a stocking full of toys and so on. So I think it's more like that. But again, you're dealing with the celestial spiritual world, so it's not that far from the idea of the Akashic records.
What do you make of Clement and Epaphroditus, two characters mentioned in Philippians, and a couple of characters mentioned in Philippians, and Robert Eisenman's conclusion that Clement is actually Titus Flavius Clemens, and the Epaphroditus in Philippians is the same one that worked with Josephus?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that'd be some coincidence if it weren't, though I suppose neither name was so uncommon. But that makes sense to me. But it's interesting to compare it with Evodia or Euodia, as some render it, and Syntyche. He wants these women to stop fighting and to come to some agreement. These names are often taken, they mean like lucky and successful. They're synonyms, and it seems like they're supposed to be just what Todorov calls narrative characters. The name sums up what they are. You don't really need to know anything else about them. They're named fictively for some quality they represent. And so I think it's just an appeal for harmony and no more squabbling, which of course is a famous favorite pastime in churches. So, but it's funny, those seem to be literary creations, but Epaphroditus and Clement don't. So then the question becomes, are these people Paul actually knew, or are they being read back into Paul's life and career to give them clout? And I don't know that we can ever be sure. It's a tempting idea. Of course, it's possible, if it is not a pseudepigraph. I think it is, but if it isn't, that would apparently make it look very likely that, yeah, Paul had contact with these historical figures. It's just that I don't know how you can be sure either way.
And I don't think First Clement helps because Clement never states that he knew Paul. And that Paul died a long time ago. So Philippians kind of contradicting that and trying to make it look
Yeah,
like that they knew each other when they did not.
right. Yeah, very good point. Yes.
We do have a super chat. Solar Knight, thank you for your super chat. Moses once blotted out God's book, Exodus 32:32.
Yes, didn't he say God's about to destroy the people because of their idolatrous orgies down there and with the golden calf? And he says, "No, cut me out of the book of life." I think there. It could mean either one, so that I'm no longer on your preferred list or the register of the living. Kill me, but not them. I kind of lean toward the latter, especially since heavenly eternal life doesn't seem to be in view very often in the Pentateuch. And
Besides,
this image appears in a lot of ancient religions and so forth. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, no problem. So besides Philippians possibly knowing about Paul's death, does it also indicate that it was written after the temple destruction? Does it know anything or give a hint to the temple being destroyed, like we encountered in some of the previous letters that we've covered?
Not that I can think of. Probably missing something, but he's against those who preach the need for Christian circumcision. He mentions, well, okay. Wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. It's Galatians where he gets into the allegory of Sarah and Hagar, which might well imply knowledge of the Roman destruction. But in Philippians, oh, I don't know of anything. Do you have something in mind? You have an eagle eye for this stuff.
Well, I guess the Clement thing would kind of fit in there. If it is the same Clement, then yeah, that would be evidence. It's later.
I see.
In 70 AD. What about you also note in the book that you see parallels with Gnostic ideas, stuff like the fall of Sophia in Philippians. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. F.C. Bauer pointed this out. One of the reasons he thought it was not authentically Pauline was, he says, the terminology in the so-called Canosis hymn rings true for Gnosticism, and in fact more so than any other early Christian context, because he says that he emptied himself. That's where we get the kenosis, emptying, from. And he says in Valentinian Gnosticism, when Sophia she's on the rim of the pleroma, and she wants to continue the emanation chain from the Father, and there were like 365 ions. She's the last, and she's by herself. The others were in pairs. And so this kind of is a way of saying that she doesn't really know the wisdom of God. It's like the Father is the Sun, S-U-N, and the ions are the planets. It's just my analogy. And Sophia is Pluto. She's out on the rim and so far away from the source of her own creation that she appears to be exactly the opposite. Whereas the sun is unimaginably huge, Pluto is a little snowball. Whereas the sun is bright, Pluto is dark. The sun is hot, Pluto is cold, etc. So she doesn't really know what's going on, but she wants to. I suspect there's a kind of a pun that she wants to conceive, which she finally does, giving birth to the demiurge. But he is like a sort of disturbed half-wit, and because she didn't have the, I mean, they didn't know about this, but we would say she's working only with her own DNA. So it's not going to work very well. And the demiurge thinks he's God, but isn't. And she was trying to continue the chain. Well, she was then cast out of the pleroma into the canoma, the emptiness. And that's where all the trouble begins, with the demiurge creating the material world and so on. And Bauer said, this is no coincidence. He emptied himself and went beyond the sunny realm of the divine emanations, and was cast out into the cold darkness of the godless universe. And I have to admit that kind of makes sense, because I don't really believe Dunn was right. I think this is some sort of pre-earthly incarnation thing. And notice it says he emptied himself. He had some sort of divinity, but set it aside. That's not exactly two nature Christology. And it seems to me, though, of course, again, you can't prove it, but where does the signal point? And it seems to me it is in a Gnostic direction. And that could mean that it's post-Pauline, because if it's distinctively, albeit implicitly, Valentinian, as I would say Colossians is too, then that probably would make it post-Pauline.
Can you go back to Philippians mentioning or being familiar with Paul's death? You mentioned some details, I think, that kind of remind me of the Acts of Paul. Could you expand?
Well, he's awaiting trial, and he seems to he's talking bravely. "Oh, I'm sure this will be okay, but in case it's not, it'll be okay with me if it is. My free ticket to heaven, as Don Imus used to say, most Protestants go coach. But I'm sure it'll all turn out for the best. And in any event, I'll continue to minister to you." Hint, hint. It just seems to me it's so heavily ironic. If you contrast it with the roughly similar talk in one of the pastorals, where he says, well, here I am awaiting trial, and almost everybody has deserted me. Demas left and so forth. Only Luke is with me. That sounds, now I think that's pseudepigraphical on other grounds, but at least it sounds a bit more convincing that this is Paul in jail writing this, whereas it just seems to me to be pouring it on in Philippians. And you might say, Price, that's just subjective. I admit it. This is just how it strikes me. And I'm the last to say, oh, I know this is true. But that's the way it reads to me. And that it's also another thing that seems purely artificial when he says, I know there are people out there just trying to get me in trouble preaching the gospel. They don't mean it, but really in the long run, who cares, because the gospel is being preached. Wait a minute. They're trying to get Paul in trouble by preaching his message, and the authorities are going to say, darn it, we put this guy away, but it hasn't stopped anything. In other words, these idiots are risking the same fate as Paul just to upset him. Somebody didn't think this through. I mean, you can imagine the people out there lying about him or misunderstanding, like in the book of Acts, where it says, well, these people say there's another God, another king, but instead of Caesar and all that, and that'll get Paul in trouble. Now, that at least makes some sense, whether it's true or not. But this, you're putting yourself on the line. You're inviting trouble calling attention to yourself for doing the same thing that got Paul thrown in the slammer? Nobody would do that. It doesn't make any sense. So it seems to me somebody is familiar with other letters where he does warn people of the circumcision party and the false brethren. But this, it just seems to me somebody hasn't thought it through, and it's fictive.
It kind of reminds me of Salos and Gustavus being summoned before Emperor Nero in Josephus's Wars of the Jews. But I also think it's Sulla Cascala also merging his account of his imprisonment because of Emperor Domitian's death at 96 AD, his assassination by Stephanos. When they stabbed each other to death, and I think it's the same kind of story. Not the same kind of story, but the same person. Stephen mentioned in 1 Corinthians that the greetings to households of Stephanos. It kind of fits the bill, and the assassinating the son of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians.
Yeah, that would make sense. See, you're bringing in a frame of reference I never thought of. It's fascinating.
When you look at Marcion's version of Philippians to the canonical version, what are some of the major differences between the two?
I don't really know. I'm not familiar enough with it. I've read it, but it didn't stay with me. I'd have to go back and look at the reconstruction of it again. What are some differences that you can think of?
Well, apparently it doesn't mention Clement and Epaphroditus. That's one thing. It's a couple of things. But anyway, so in general, you think that Philippians is very, very similar to Johannine theology.
Yeah, apparently, depending on how you understand the Canosis hymn. But if it does mean what people usually think it means, yeah, that the word was made flesh, it does seem to imply a higher Christology than you can be sure you find in other epistles with Paul's name on them. There are passages that could be read that way, like in Galatians, when the fullness of time had arrived, God sent forth his son, but that doesn't necessarily mean from heaven to earth. Whereas, if you take this that way and setting aside divine attributes, it does make sense that way. And so does this attest more Johannine or Philonic leaning Christology? I wouldn't be surprised. And, the fact that we can talk about it like this, when you think of the way the Bible is quoted in churches as if, oh, yeah, we know exactly what it means. This gives people impatience. They say, well, you guys can't even determine what it means. Yeah, don't you see the implication of that? You can't thunder away from the pulpit. Can you imagine a guy saying, my friends, it's a 48% probability that God is against homosexuality. It's like a 60% likelihood that Christ was fully divine before his birth in Bethlehem. Nobody would do that, right? But they just don't know. Their tradition completely controls their reading of the text. Whoever told them to read the Bible told them what it meant, and they don't. They're not stupid, but they just don't have the same sort of interest in the text the historical exegete has. And I'm not trying to be like the Sanhedrin of the Gospel of John saying, this mob that knoweth not the law is accursed. No, they're not. They're good people. You just can't expect everybody to be interested in these arcane things. But once you are into it, you realize things are much more complicated than you were led to believe.
And then my final question for tonight, what do you make of scholars when they try to rescue Philippians as being a pre-war epistle by the hands of Paul, when they state, well, the church leadership structure of Philippians is nothing like the pastorals. It's actually very different, so they claim.
Yeah, I don't see where the difference lies. I mean, it doesn't spell out the qualifications and the duties of the bishops and deacons. But what the heck? I mean, you've got those, if it distinguishes two sort of more or less clerical orders, compare that with First Corinthians, where you've got different people in the congregation who have different charismatic gifts, with hints that they're only possessed sporadically and may even circulate among the members, that it's not a permanent possession of anybody. This is about as far away as you could get. It's like comparing the Episcopal Church with Pentecostals. Don't tell me there's no difference between them. And that's kind of what they're saying. I think they're just kidding themselves.
All right, everybody, the link to purchase The Amazing Colossal Apostle and many other books by Bob Price will be in the description below and the pinned comment, including the link to his Substack. And with that being said, Bob, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.